Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to Morgan State University. Also welcome to the Research and Scholarship Series. This series is organized by the School of Education and Urban Studies in collaboration with the Division of International Affairs and the Star Scholars. We run this type of session bi-weekly on a wide range of educational topics related to research and publication, both for faculty and students. In a few minutes, our outstanding panelists and the guest will introduce the prestigious journals that they are affiliated with, their research experiences and tips for becoming editors or co-editors for any professional journals, and some pieces of advice for emerging scholars. And they will also answer your questions for sure and invite you to participate in group discussion. Later, I will announce the current and upcoming research opportunities for both faculty and students, and you can share with other colleagues as well. My name is Krishna Bista, Professor of Higher Education in the Department of Advanced Studies, Leadership and Policy at Morgan State University. I'm also the founding editor of Journal of International Student, one of the flagship journal in higher education, and you will hear about the journal in a few minutes. We have roughly 60 minutes ahead of us, and I invite all of you to reflect some of the fundamental questions that you see on my screen. So now it's time to introduce our speakers who have accepted our invitation to join this session, despite their busy schedule and the time differences. Thank you. Before our panel, before we start the panel discussion, I request each editor to take a few minutes to introduce themselves to their journal and experiences as an editor. First, we start from Pearl Suburn, Dr. Suburn from Monash University. Pearl, over to you.
Hello, Krishna, and thank you for the welcome. And hello, everyone. My name is Pearl Subban. I am an academic at Monash University in Melbourne, Australia. And I'm also one of the section editors in education for Sage Open. So there's a couple of us, there's three of us. I'm one of them. And yes, it's such a privilege to be part of you and part of this conversation and to be able to learn from some of what's going to be happening here today. The journal is very large in that it is a platform for close to 100 articles, perhaps in a month, going through the process, and that's why there's so many of us who work in the editing space. So it is peer-reviewed, and there is an APC charge involved with publication on this platform. But given the fact that it has attracted a great deal of attention, especially during the COVID period, it has become very, very popular. There's both open access and closed formats as well. And the focus in the last couple of years has been on education and the hybrid delivery of education. But we have focused a great deal on the behavioral sciences as well in the last 2 years. So it has been a very busy time, both for reviewers and for authors. But yes, the journal is very strong. Sage Open, as you know, is a very popular platform for many authors as well. And the process, as I will mention later, has been a little tricky over the last 2 years, but we're hoping to get past that soon. Thank you. Thanks again, Krishna.
Thank you, Pearl. Then we move to Dr. Jeffrey Froyd from The Ohio State University, the editor of International Journal of STEM Education. Jeff?
My name is Jeff Froyd. I'm the chair of the Department of Engineering Education at Ohio State University. I'm also just an associate editor for the International Journal of STEM Education, so I'm representing the journal. The journal is about 8 years old. It was founded in 2014. Its focus really is on cross-disciplinary work in STEM education. So it does publish articles on math education, engineering education, science education, technology education, but it was really founded to look at articles and studies that cross those disciplinary boundaries, because the editor Yuping Lee was very focused on, when he created the journal, saying we have a number of journals in math education or engineering education, or physics education, biology education. We don't have many journals that focus on cross-disciplinary work across those areas. So that was the kind of new feature of the journal. It's been around for 8 years and it's doing pretty well now.
Thank you, Jeff. Very much appreciated. Yes, this is also open access journal. We invite all open access journal today. Thank you. Next, we move to, I'd like to invite Dr. Josh Kunath from Highland High School, editor of Journal of School Administration, Research and Development. Josh?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bista. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm going to put the link into our journal into the chat. Anyone wants to check that out as I'm introducing JSARD. So the Journal of School Administration, Research and Development, we were founded in 2016. We are an open access journal, peer-reviewed academic journal. And as an open access journal, our aim is really to lower the barriers to publication, but at the same time to simultaneously strive to ensure that we publish high quality research, of course. I've been the editor over the last 4 years. The mission of JSARD is to publish and to disseminate relevant high quality literature in educational leadership in order to empower researchers, practitioners, and policymakers to improve K through 12 schools. So we do focus on kindergarten through 12th grade schools. Although we do focus primarily on schools at the moment in the United States, we welcome articles from in K through 12 schools from the United States, and so studies that have wide implications that could apply to schools from around the U.S. JSARD publishes twice annually in the spring and the fall. We have our upcoming spring issue in a couple of weeks, so I invite you to check that out on our website. We do emphasize both a combination of the theory and practice together. So we truly employ a pragmatist paradigm at JSARD. We primarily focus on publishing empirical research. In addition to that, though, we welcome manuscripts that are literature reviews, what we call best practice articles, meaning they're research-based, but they describe current best practices in the field. Also essays and commentaries. As I mentioned, we focus on educational leadership in K through 12, a range of topics. So things such as curriculum leadership, instructional leadership, professional development, equity, diversity, inclusion, grading and assessment, educational technology, so on and so forth.
Thank you, Josh. We move to Dr. Brooksie Sturdevant, editor of Journal of Trauma Studies in Education. Brooksie.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for inviting us. I am Dr. Brooksie Sturdevant, as he mentioned, with the Journal of Trauma Studies in Education. We serve under the leadership of Dr. Jason Lynch, who is our executive editor and the founder of this particular journal. The Journal of Trauma Studies in Education is an online open access academic peer review journal. It's dedicated to the generation of knowledge regarding mental health and well-being. We focus on the impact of traumatic stress in pre-K-12 schools, as well as post-secondary education. And we do accept domestic as well as international submissions. We're looking to release our inaugural issue fall 2022, so be on the lookout for that. We do accept various types of manuscripts, and we also release calls for special issues, and we have 2 of those that are already underway. We accept research papers of mixed qualitative and quantitative methodologies, research in progress, as well as practitioner and theoretical perspective papers and book reviews. So I'll also put the link to the journal in the chat so that you can take a look. And I'll definitely be on for you to ask any questions that you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, let's hear from Dr. Kim Bullington, editor of the Higher Education Politics and Economics. Kim.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Bullington. I'm from Old Dominion University, which is in Norfolk, Virginia. And I work in two departments. The first is engineering management and systems engineering, where I run their programs. And the second is educational foundations and leadership, where I teach. So Higher Education, Politics and Economics is a journal that is open access, and we really want it to be for all voices. What we are thinking is that we want knowledge exchange, because that is at the heart of academia and a free society. So higher education should find ways to advance knowledge and improve lives. But really, politics and economics tend to perpetuate inequalities and privilege among power structures. And this journal is really in place to challenge those concepts. So we offer 4 types of publication. The first is research paper, where people are doing empirical research articles. And we really are interested in finding innovative and provocative approaches to research and research reporting. Don't be afraid to do a qualitative method that has not been, that is not common. We love to see that kind of stuff. We also want review articles, which are critical evaluations of previously published materials, and opinion pieces, short, narrowly focused, very quick articles with contemporary interests and emerging issues. And we really would love to see a lot more graduate research in progress. So for that, we're looking for preliminary findings from original research with implications for scholars, practitioners, and policymakers. As with the other journals, we really want to focus on research and analysis from all regions of the world, because we need to learn from each other. So we're looking at issues like social mobility, basic needs and securities, immigration policies, free speech, financial aid policies, free college, dual enrollment. So what we really would like to see is having these articles combine disciplinary methods with critical insights to investigate major issues shaping national, state, and institutional and international contexts.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The next, I have invited Dr. Cerma, editor of the Journal of Multidisciplinary Perspective in Higher Education. He will talk in a few minutes. This is also open access journal. And he has also prepared some material for us tonight, but we'll hear from him in about 30 minutes. Now, I do have a special friend, Dr. Emmanuel Mogagi, for a quick introduction. He's the editor of a new book, Green Marketing. Emmanuel?
Yes, good evening, good morning. Thank you so much for the invite. It's been a pleasure to share this platform with many great editors. So thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Emmanuel Mogagi. I'm a senior lecturer in advertising and marketing communications at the University of Greenwich in London. And I worked on this book with my fellow colleagues that looked at green marketing in emerging markets. I guess the focus is actually from 2 perspectives to really understand the whole idea of greenwashing and the whole idea of sustainability, and perhaps how brands are really doing that. But specifically to look at it from an emerging market perspective. So to look at green marketing within the context of countries where we might feel they don't even have the resources to look into to put much effort into green marketing, because sometimes we feel green marketing should be for those people, those countries who are developed, who have got the resources, who have got the financial capabilities to make some decisions about what to buy or what not. So this is just what we've been trying to do, to explore that in 2 different contexts, the green marketing and emerging market. But I guess with a book, it's quite a different experience, because perhaps unlike journals that things keeps coming up and you need to keep sort of open opportunity for people to come and submit. But I guess in case of books, it's like a closed loop. Like, yes, everybody needs to submit at the same time, need to finish up at the same time, get published at the same time. So I think it's always a different experience, but it's nice for me to share this platform with you all and to get more understanding about how it works on different sides. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, it's a different experience. We will hear from you again in a few minutes. And finally, let me invite Dr. Lynn, my co-editor of this recent book, for a quick introduction. C.
Yes, hi. So we have this book. Our aim is to respond to the growing need for recruitment and retention of international talent in higher education institutions globally. Our book documents the experiences and contribution of international researchers and faculty originating from or arriving in countries including China, Australia, Iraq, Japan, and the US. So our book includes 4 sections: gender and identity in transactional context, social linguistic and cultural diversity in the global classroom, employment equity in academic mobility and migration, and lastly, support integration and inclusion of international faculty. So we believe that our book will benefit researchers, academics, and educators with an interest in higher education, international and comparative education, and more specifically, those involved with faculty development programs. We also expect our book will support further discussion and reflection around multicultural education, international teaching and learning, and educational policy. Thank you.
Thank you for that quick introduction. Right, so you may be thinking, already, wow, that's quite a lot of information and resources for a scholar interested in research and publication. So now it's time for a group discussion. We can start with the, one question. We have several questions, in fact. So we plan to take questions from our audience as well. Please continue using the chat room to put your questions to our speakers. We can go in any orders, maybe starting with Pearl or Jeff, Joss or Brooksie, and then move on. So we can start the first question here. What tips or suggestions do you offer for emerging scholar who want to publish, their articles? And then we can talk about the book chapters or the books later. Sure.
I think one of the factors that must be borne in mind when an individual is thinking about scholarship and about publication with regard to articles or books is the creation of a research trajectory. I think we often talk about having a plan and having a schedule, and they are actually 2 different things, but they work together. So for example, a plan maps out everything that you'd like to do, but the schedule places times and dates in position, and they work together. So I know when I started out in academia, my mentor said to me, you've got to have a 3-year plan and a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan and work backward from there. And that's kind of the way that I've seen it over the last few years since I've been in academia. I think if someone wants to publish a book in 3 years, for example, they would develop an agenda and a timeline starting today. Beginning small, so for example, with an op-ed or a commentary and smaller research pieces, for example, like Brooksie was telling us about earlier as well, and then transition from there into more scholarly spaces. So you could present at a conference, for example, and have a conference publication and a peer-reviewed forum. You could work progressively and incrementally towards a larger goal, like a larger research paper. I think it's a good idea to be mentored. So becoming acquainted with colleagues who have published and chatting with them about their experiences and reflecting with them on the journey as well is a good idea. You come to know the joy of publishing, but then also some of the pitfalls that might shape that journey as well. I think writing all the time is important. If you want to join a conversation, you've got to have something to say. You've got to be informed. You've got to read widely. So yeah, I think just to get it started.
Thank you. Jeff, anything you want to chime in?
So I'll take a slightly different tack. I was focusing on, I have in mind a particular article. So I'm not thinking, as Pearl said, of the long-term research trajectory, but if you're thinking of a particular article, I've found that it is important for an author to have in mind, what is the contribution of the article? Many times authors are interested in writing and saying, I have things to share, I have things to describe, I have things that I want people to know. But to me, it's going to come down to what is your contribution and your clarity in terms of that, and then how well do you support that in the article. And many times I find that articles are stronger when people have a clear idea of what their contribution is, and then they can think a little more clearly about how they're going to support that contribution.
Yeah, I think one of my things is I don't like to write alone. I think writing alone is it's a horrible process. And if I have co-authors who have strengths that I don't have, that really helps me as well. Is I have a paper and I have my list of papers, and I use I call it a stoplight method. So green means the process is done for whatever that section is, whether it's the outline, intro, literature review, the method section. Yellow means we're still working on it. And then red means that something happened, like it was a revise and resubmit or is not done at all. So that allows me to really focus on multiple publications at the same time, because right now I am writing 13 different articles. So that really helps me keep focused on what I'm doing. And I can say, hey, Josh, have you worked on this little section yet? And I can keep my group in some kind of revolution where we're always doing something. So don't write alone and be organized. And also don't be afraid to write, because rejection has helped me become a better writer. And the peer review process has helped me become a better writer, even though it's annoying.
Okay, thank you very much. Josh, your journal is slightly different, the audience-wise. Any tips, suggestions for those school teachers or students who are focusing on K-12?
Sure. Well, I was going to add just something a little bit more practical anyway, but I think this applies maybe to the, to the educators and practitioners. But as far as the writing goes, the act of writing and the habits of writing, and at least for myself, I think the habit of writing every day, whatever that time is, I think is a really important habit. I try to employ the Ernest Hemingway method of to write in while you still have some flow going on before you get stuck, and to make that a habit and to continue that. And I also think it's really important to continue to study your methodology. The more, even as you continue to publish, to continue to improve there, and to look for those well-established authors and those who are hallmarks in the field, to continue in that way. I wanted to just mention one more thing about finding the fit for a journal, because I think that's really important as well. And to after spending all of the time to write your manuscript, but to continue that process of research to find the right fit, as far as the aims and scope of the journal, as far as the requirements, as far as word limits, as far as topics, to make sure it's a good fit, so it's worth your time and it's worth that journal's time. And I think it makes the whole process easier for everybody.
Thank you. Let's move to the second question here. How can emerging scholars come out of their disciplinary silos and advance a more interdisciplinary research agenda? That's happening, more and more in academia. They just want to work by themselves.
A long time ago, when I was an associate editor for the Journal of Engineering Education, after we'd been publishing for a few years, we looked and said, what fraction of the articles do we publish that are single author, and what fraction are multiple authors? And we found that by far we publish the majority of articles from multiple authors. And so I think it is really hard for a person to say, I'm going to come out of my disciplinary silo, because the person just brings what they bring. And they can enlarge that, as Joshua said, by reading, but ultimately, if you want to bring in different perspectives, different disciplines, you really need to cultivate collaborations with other people. And that really sparks a far more productive, I think, move than anything else. There will be some friction. There will be some initial turbulence as you adjust to the terminology and how somebody else works. That you find that, oh, well, this is the way we use this term, or this is the way we use this particular methodology. And somebody says, well, we use this differently. But ultimately, those conversations merge into something more productive. And so I think the first step to take is to think about who can I collaborate with, because I think it was Kim that said earlier, writing alone is, at least for me, painful. And writing with other people is just a joy, because you get things that you would never think of.
Yes, and natural sciences, engineering, medicine probably is a good example of the teamwork. Many of the manuscripts I see coming in as a group authors, unlike in social sciences. Probably Pearl or Kim, Josh, you might have a different opinion or experiences you want to chime in.
I think joint writing and collaboration with peers is excellent. And more articles that are co-written are actually published these days as well. I think there's a degree of a quality check. I agree with everything that's been said previously by Jeff about the idea of writing alone and the joy of writing together. But I also think that there's a bit of a quality check when there's more than one author. I just co-authored one that was written by 9, or there's 9 of us in the team. And, it was such an excellent learning process because everyone brought a different lens into that article, which is really good. So I think collaboratively crafting a manuscript is always going to be a good thing. But if you want to get out of your silo, it might actually involve reaching out to people who are outside your field. So, we are cloistered a little bit in education and enjoy what we do, but reaching out to people, for example, in psychology or social work or even engineering, and talking about educational processes within that context as well would be good. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone wants to chime in before we move to next question?
If I may comment on that,
please.
I also think when you're coming out of your silo, you need to come out with something good. Yes, because imagine that everybody is busy. Everybody has got things they are working on. You can't just come out of your silo and come empty-handed. You need to bring something to the table. You need to make sure you also got something to contribute. Because I think it's important for us to always reiterate that. Like, yes, we want to collaborate, but yes, what skills have you got? What can you do when we decide to work together? What experience have you got? What have you done before on your own? So I think before you can even come and say you want to come out of your silo, you must have some demonstrable evidence of your own hard work as an individual. So at least when you are proposing somebody, they just need to maybe check your Google Scholars or just check your name out there. That builds some kind of credibility, and that builds some kind of an assurance. So even though by the time you send in the email, they've seen your name, they've checked you like, oh, this is somebody I can work with. So I think before you start thinking about moving to talk to people, try and see what you can do on your own.
Thank you. I've been getting questions here in the chat. What are the opportunities for the scholars interested in serving on the review board or editorial board of your journal? And what does the expectation or commitment look like? I know it's a broad question.
I think there's a lot of opportunity for scholars interested in serving on a review board. In the post-pandemic era, I think there's emerging opportunities. The pandemic stalled and impacted on academic processes. That's including reviewing and editing, and even the regularity of writing on the part of some scholars as well. So I think many who were consistently involved in the field of work might have withdrawn on account of different factors. So I think there's lots of opportunity for work, and on every website, including the Sage Open website, there are email addresses to get in touch with the executive or the chief editor and the publisher and express interest. And I would think that there's multiple opportunities for that.
I'll talk a little bit about what's expected once you're a part of the review team or on the editorial board. With our editorial board, those individuals serve for 2 years. We currently have 4 associate editors, 25 editorial board members, and 34 reviewers. So since those are 2-year terms, those positions will potentially rotate out. But as far as our reviewers, we definitely try to match the reviewers based on their interest and expertise. So in that case, if you're a reviewer, you're usually going to experience an article or submission that aligns with your research experience, methodology, discipline, or even theoretical frameworks. We are mindful of the numbers of requests that we send to each individual reviewer. We're able to see within our system if that person's reviewed an article just in the last month. We probably wouldn't choose that person even if their interests align. We would choose someone that hasn't been asked, I guess you could say, maybe in the last 2 months or 3 months, basically trying to give our reviewers a break in between reviews. We do have a rating rubric. And so as far as those expectations, we look at how quickly they are able to maintain the deadlines, because we do have turnaround expectations. And then we also rate each reviewer on their constructive feedback. So we do offer trainings and opportunities, I would say quarterly, through the editorial board and the associate editors to make sure that the reviewers are up to speed and we're doing the job consistently. So that's pretty much how we operate. Thanks.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad the same question came here in my private chat box. It says, does your publication provide mentoring in the publication and peer review process for emerging scholar or authors? If so, what does this mentoring process include? Jeff or Pearl, your journals are slightly different, coming from the commercial publishing house. Do they provide any mentoring opportunities or any process involved?
I'm not aware of any mentoring opportunities for upcoming editors because it often goes through the pipeline of being a reviewer and then a senior reviewer, and then that senior reviewer is usually viewed as someone who then steps up into an editorial position. So I think if you are wanting to go that route, it's probably a good idea to review in that journal frequently so that you set that up for yourself as well.
Thank you. All right. Any other editors want to share if you have a mentoring in the publication process, and what does it look like or it includes?
We do not, but don't be afraid to ask. I mean, I would be glad to mentor somebody through a peer review process, because if I had not been mentored through many of my experiences in higher education, I would not be where I am. I'm not saying that I'm like super high up in anything, but it's because people have mentored me. And I think when somebody submits to higher education, politics, and economics, what I try to do is really focus on getting a reviewer who is as close to connected to that area as possible. But then I really focus on working with the authors and with the peer reviewers on not only their peer reviews, but also on the writing piece. So if a peer review person may say something that might be a little bit stingy, I try to help them soften that language up a little bit sometimes when that's necessary. And I think that's a job of an editor to do. But I also like to work with the authors and help them not only with the APA piece, because that helps me get better at the APA piece, which is our requirement, but help them with the language process. So especially with international authors writing in English, I really like to help them because sometimes the language differences can become apparent in academic journals. And this is something that I just personally like to do. So always don't be afraid to ask. The worst somebody can say is no.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Bissett, if I could just add as well, I'm
Please.
going to echo a couple of things here. At well, we're always looking for peer reviewers at JSAR, first of all, and I mean, we really believe that peer reviewers are the lifeblood of the whole process. So really value reviewers, and again, I'll echo that the process of peer review is such a important process to better understand publication and to further skills. And then to help to eventually, again, if the idea is to become an editor in the future, to develop those relationships, to understand the system, to be a part of the whole process. So we at JSTART, we ask for reviewers to review up to 3 manuscripts per year. And we give them up to 5 weeks to review manuscripts. We do have a peer review guide. We do not currently have a formal mentoring process, but that is in the works, and I think that's a great process for the journals that have that. The journals that have that, I applaud you for that. It's great. But I will also echo that I always encourage, if anybody has questions, any of our reviewers to ask about that.
Thank you. I've been receiving many questions. Please continue using the chat room. Let me read the next question I have here. What is the best approach to identify the most relevant journals for potential publication, particularly for emerging scholar? I've been reading some crucial element that includes the journal's mission, vision, and scope.
But I think it starts first from what are you reading? Yes, so I think you need to check your own literature review. What have you been reading? And that is one of those places you want to also publish your work. So you want to check what are those things you'll be reading. Check your literature review for your PhD or your Mendeley or Zotero or wherever you store your references. So that's an indication of places you should try to work with. Also, what are those lists? So number 2, what are those lists that you have that your fellow colleagues are publishing in? So perhaps in your department, you see their CVs, you see their website. What are those journals they are publishing in? Number 3, how about your supervisor? How about maybe your mentor? What type of journals are they publishing in? Number 4, you might be thinking about, we've got the Elsevier Journal Finder. You can put in your abstract there, then it's going to give you some insight about some journals that could be of interest to you. Yeah, so I think that's just some of the few tips I can just quickly check.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Somebody mentioned Simago. I don't know how to say it, SCIMAGO in the chat. But in higher education, somebody, I think his name is Zachary Turner, created this Google Doc, and it's got all these higher education journals and conferences. It's a database that they update. We cannot update it, but they update it. They look at our websites and they look at the acceptance rate. They look at the word count. And this has really helped me find a lot of journals that I can publish in as well. And I posted it in the chat.
Thank you. Yes, any information in the chat would be fine. The other question here, are there any tips for identifying predatory journals? How to help emerging scholar avoid such, journals and be careful in publication world?
The K-Bell, which is a great tool. And then also for like ResearchGate sometimes also has authors reviews about a specific journal. And also there is another website. I usually check the journal information there. I also put in the chat. I want to add one more thing is you can also check the articles that published by your colleagues, like what kind of journals they usually published. That's also a great way to avoid like the not very good journal.
Okay, any other editors wants to chime in?
We did have a website once. I could be wrong, but I think it was called Beale's List. It might be old and dated. And I don't know whether it's gone into some distributor. I haven't followed up, but it's checking a site like that usually is a good idea, peer reviewed and blind. Sometimes we receive emails as writers, and an unsolicited email should be viewed with some suspicion, I would think. That's a bit of a worry. So, just be careful of such publications. But other than that, I think maybe doing some background research, through Google might be a good way to get to know whether it is predatory or not.
Yeah, yes, if I can quickly come to comment on that. I think I remember that list as well. I think Bill's list, but I think there was a lot of yes, comment about. I think unfortunately he had to pull it off. But some insight I also want to share it, maybe from my experience coming from a design background, where you see the layout of a journal, you will know if it's reputable. Again, that's from an experience. Elsevier has got his own template. Sage has got his own template. Most of these journals has got their own template. So sometimes when you see a journal that is just, it doesn't really look so professional in terms of the layout, I think that's a red flag. And also when you see the names, maybe international, something, it's quite mixed up. Again, that could be a red flag. And also if you check the acceptance, so often most journals, it goes through a lot of process, maybe as submitted in January, reviewed in February, reviewed in August, September, October, accepted after almost 2 years. So if you see a journal that is accepting a paper in 1 week, again, those are some of those red flags we should be mindful of, because often I'm sure you can understand, even for you to send it to peer review, for them to read it and send it back, that can be done in 1 week. So again, that's some of the red flags that I think our early career researchers should be looking out for.
Sure, Jeff.
So Pearl mentioned this earlier about a research trajectory. So I think you want to have a plan about where you want to publish over the next 2 or 3 years. So I think one of the ways to avoid predatory journals is to look at where, as somebody else said, what you're reading, what your colleagues are publishing in, and then to develop a plan and say, I want to publish in X journal within like 2 or 3 years, and so I think where you're driven by, I have an article, I want to get it published, I think you're more likely to run into problems with predatory journals when you start looking around, rather than where you have a plan of saying, I know the journals in my field that are going to be looked at by my colleagues and so forth as significant contributions. And so then you begin to say, okay, if I want to publish in that journal, what are the kind of things I need to get there? What kind of articles are they already publishing? Do I know anybody that's published there? What kind of experience can they share? But I think, again, where you have a plan for the journals that you like to be publishing in for a project or for your next 2 to 3 years, that's going to avoid a lot of predatory journals, because you will have already thought carefully about the choice of where you want to publish. And you're generally not going to pick a predatory journal if you're paying attention to where other people are publishing and then saying, that's what I want to move toward.
This is Boniface from Marshall University in West Virginia, US. The other aspect is the money. Sometimes they tell you that if you send in your document, you can just pay $200 or whatever, and it will publish for certain. And that's one other aspect that it is a predatory journal, because the money, they say, okay, we'll publish your thing if you send us this amount of money. I think it's the other aspect for those predatory journals. And I would say with Jeff, what he is saying is that that in your own discipline, there are different types of journals. For me, as a sociologist, I have the higher journals. If I publish in the American Sociological Review, is different than if I publish in the Sociological Current. Current is the regional article. So if I know where the ranking between my own discipline, the journals are, it makes it easy for me to avoid all of those other things, because peer-reviewed journals don't ask you for money. And so that's the other aspect, because I was asked when I was in my graduate program to send $500 if I want to be published in like a week. And I was like, hey, in a week, in my knowledge, in my master's program, nobody said anything about a week. And in my PhD program, no one said anything about a week. So this is probably not something good. So I just avoided that. So thank you very much for sharing all of that information. And so money, time, I think are good elements to determine what the predatory journals are.
Thank you so much. We covered a lot here. Before I introduce one of our editors, Dr. Sharma, I have one question. And I like Dr. Lynn to answer this. Are book chapter peer reviewed? And what does a typical review process look like?
The book chapter review. I think it's kind of like it's kind of similar to the peer review article, the review process, but probably like the time may be a little bit shorter, and we may have some like a little bit different the criteria, but pretty much it's similar.
Thank you very much. So I know we are almost top of the hour. So let me quickly ask Dr. Sharma to introduce himself and, and then chime in any things that you want to say. And still we have some questions in the chat room. So Dr. Sharma.
There is a tension between this pragmatic worldview. There's article processing charge. What a fancy phrase. For doing things that most of us don't like, and an idealistic world where we would like to have the scholarly agency and creativity and our direct social impact without these middlemen, standing between us with their paywalls and gatekeeping and all kinds of shenanigans. But in recent years, I have also become a little optimistic about the possibilities because the ecology, due to technological evolution, due to global networking among scholars, due to the commitment and persistence of many scholars like Dr. Bista and other colleagues who run these platforms, by finding resources and sponsorship and support, and by pooling together talent and resource from around the world, by supporting mentoring. So I see that alternative ecologies can also thrive. And what I would like to urge any emerging scholars in this landscape is you can get the best of both worlds if you are committed and passionate about it. On the one hand, you can be a little entrepreneurial and find resources and platforms and support if you band together and seek these kinds of resources. On the other hand, you don't need to give up to these predatory journals or even payment-based journals. I have serious doubt that these payment-based journals can have quality and rigor and ethics and social values, socially driven mission behind them. Because what happens when somebody gives someone $200 to publish an article? They're not likely to process the article in the same way that they would process the article, right? And so let us not be frustrated by the corrupt and negative and side of this business, of this landscape, and let us be driven by that deeper passion, and we will be able to find both a broader value to do the work that we do to contribute to society, and also do it in a way that is sustainable and feasible and that taps into the talent and passion of a network of scholars like this one. Heard that oftentimes when you reach out to a journal that is otherwise good, but also charges an APC, article processing charge, and to say that your salary is not at a scale that you can afford that kind of money to pay in dollar amount. I know that they waive these fees sometimes, but they will neither waive this fee, nor is it within your, comfortable range. Don't publish with them. Find something. In fact, I would take it a step further, and I would say that push back against the neoliberal machine in your local university and your local system that pushes you into the laps of these people that are undermining the mission of scholarship by doing this pay to play business. Push back. Maybe start a journal that is of high quality and work with your academic administrators and policymakers and say, will you value the work that we're doing here, or would you simply push us to the pay-to-play international business? I think it is not either or again, as that was my broader message earlier. It is not so either or. We have tremendous leverage if we are passionate and connected. That's what I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Sharma. Dr. Suburn and Dr. Froyd, any comment, any, that question earlier was for you in your journals. Do you get those questions from the authors?
Yes.
How do you?
Yeah, I do support Dr. Sharma's views regarding the pushback against, against paying the ABC. But I think it's unfortunate that with some of the larger publications, like the ones from Sage Open, where there's very little negotiation in terms of paying the fee, the ABC seems to be set per journal, and it's what authors are asked to pay. I do understand your point of view, though. And I do believe as well there are other ways in which we can be published. And it is unfortunate that so many of the larger publishers are now charging an ABC, and it can sometimes run into hundreds of dollars. So totally get what you're saying, but I also know that it's sometimes non-negotiable with some platforms.
We shouldn't let them sell the same chicken 3 times. That's what they're doing.
Jeff, any comment?
So I think ultimately the journal is interested in publishing work. I mean, so when I look at the journal, the review process goes through, and we talk about, and the review is done with respect to the contributions of the manuscript. And then if it is accepted, then there's the question of how we would meet the article processing charge. I think most times the journals would like to publish the article if the author is unable to pay for it. I think the key thing is, what is the case the author is making for why the payment is a problem, why an exception should be granted. The challenge when the person says, I work in this community, this country, and the salaries of the teachers are X, and I would like an exception, in other words, not to pay the article processing charge. If an exception is made for a person, that person in the country, then the question is, well, why don't I make that exception for everybody in that, every faculty member in that country? And so the question really is, what's the case for being able to either have no charge or a reduced charge? And I think that the author needs to be clear about why an exception should be granted. So the journals that I've worked with are very interested in publishing the work that and if it's already been accepted, they would really like to publish the work. It's just a question that they also are running a business.
Yeah.
And that brings, as Dr. Sharma said earlier, that brings some constraints along with it. And, but Dr. Sharma is concealing something, not intentionally, but ultimately the operation costs money.
I was going to say that. Yeah.
And, it's a question of where the finances come from. If you find a donor that is willing to support it, that's great. But then the donor may have some of their own interest attached to it.
Yes, Jeff, that was my next question here too. The question going other way, Sage charge $1,200 and then your journal charge $1,690. And the question for the Dr. Kim and Dr. Brooksie, how do you do operation of the journal? Yes, it's cost a lot of money in the production of the journal.
Well, for higher education, politics, and economics, we're part of the Open Journal Education Database, OJED. So you saw that in a lot of the URLs that we shared. That is for JSARD and for the Journal of Trauma Studies as well. And because of generous donations from universities, we are able to do this for free for the authors. We don't get paid either. So this is a volunteer piece for us as well. So it's the universities that are helping us with this charge, and we don't have to charge other people to do that. So I think we're lucky for that.
The cost has to come from somewhere. I guess we should not lump every paid journal in the same way. There are many varieties of them. What I was trying to say that there's so many different possibilities that scholars should not paint the picture in black and white. And Dr. Freud, I was trying to get at what you said, that cost has to come from somewhere, right? Nothing is free. There's no such thing as free. However, I think we should see different possibilities as scholars. I think we should, as scholars, even if there's a little higher indexing or whatever attachment to a journal that you have to pay your 5 months of salary, don't do that. You have a responsibility towards the next generation because nobody is able to pay. You may be able to pay because you've got a federal funding. You may be able to pay because you are more privileged, but be careful about the landscape. Would you want anybody to pay 5 months worth of salary to publish an article in North America, in Europe? You wouldn't. And that means we should feel morally, ethically responsible, socially responsible to make sure that the landscape is more diverse, the ecology is richer, that we don't fall into these impossible trends. Because when a trend becomes acceptable widely, people just go with it. Scholars are vulnerable people too. If there's no other option, we do. Look at adjunct faculty, because the market of supply and demand, right? Look at people that are exploited and abused in the developing world today. They are faculty members, but they teach. One of my colleagues teaches 5 classes, 4 terms with 45 students per class, and she is asked to publish in international journals with high indexes. And then we should really understand that entire landscape if you're talking scholarship about produced by them. And I think we really need to diversify and complexify our understanding and not simply say, oh, what can we do? Or simply, oh, they're evil. Or simply, no, we should not be doing anything. There's a lot of latitude here.
Thank you so much. Still, I have a few, housekeeping here. I know I have lots of questions about the citation and other, the Scopus indexed journals and other questions. I will take those in a second. So thank you for answering the questions here. I'd like to let you know that we have here 8 open access journals hosted by several public universities in the US, and this could be some of the your professional platform for you. You can consider. Also, we do have some book publication projects in collaboration with Routledge, Springer, Palgrave Macmillans. Maybe you can consider those venues for upcoming book projects. Then also here are some sample books that we publish, and these are in collaboration with the open journals in education, Journal of International Student and Star Scholars. So all the books that we published, actually we published 15 books in last, I would say 22 months. All of them are, gone through peer review process. And more books here. Yes, they are on a wide range of, topic and issues on student mobility, migration, online teaching and learnings, those things. More books here. They are also on community college, higher education, faculty student experience. And you heard the synopsis of this volume from Dr. Lynn. So I appreciate that. Also, we do have some open access books, the books where are free to download, and there are also some the practices of how author find the fees for publication and making sure that it doesn't cost arm and legs for you to publish in any of these venues. And I do have a couple of upcoming events. We have bi-weekly events. And these are some of the institutions that support the open journals in education. So the journals that earlier you saw with the 0 article processing fees were, made possible with the, hours of voluntary services of those editors, reviewers, and our workload is about, I would say, nearly 4,000 manuscripts that we receive in all of our 8 journals and book projects. So with that, we go back to some of the questions here. So let's hear from the other editors if you have any final thoughts on the processing fees or journal rankings or citation metrics, and how the authors, particularly from the global South, can take advantage from your journals.
I would like to talk about the indexing and also about the reputation of the journals. Again, that is something I feel many ECRs, many early career researchers will be mindful of. So because often when you see some of these journals that are not very popular, but they are still doing some good works, I think it can be very discouraging for some scholars who feels I want to compete with the highest in the highest level. And again, perhaps that's sometimes when we want to reflect on our own experience. So this just me trying to just think loud. Would you expect an ECR, an early career researchers to be publishing in the top journal because they feel that is where I want to be, or you expect them to actually start at a very low level, then work themselves up? Because I think that's something many people seems to confuse and struggle with when they feel, you know what, I can start from the top. Because most of the journals I read, they are not well indexed. They don't have so much high impact factor. So I think that's something we also need to reflect on. Are we struggling to publish in high impact factor, or as an early career researchers, you just want to get your work out at first? So I think that's something to always reflect on. Thank you.
Emmanuel, I was thinking that if you could allocate a little bit of time for doing what is needed and doing what you love. In the words of my very senior colleague here in New York, he said, it's not either or. You could, spend a little bit of time to build some of your own local ecologies of scholarly publication and discourse. And then you can sort of pursue these other high top tier journal ambitions, because if you do both, you will not regret in the long term.
Yes, I agree with you. Thank you for sharing that. But I think it's, for me, I discussed with somebody today. I think I said it depends on what you really want. Do you just want to publish for publishing's sake? Do you want to publish that they will know you, oh, it's publishing in first-time journals? Or you want to publish and contribute to knowledge?
I think, Emmanuel, and this will go for any one of us who are in the field as well, there has to be a bit of a balance. The knowledge sharing, I think, is going to be fundamental to your career. But I think at the same time, you're going to have to think about, the game that you're playing, and whether you're playing like, it's the big fish in the small pond or the big fish in the sea. So you decide where you're going to be fitting it. So, and I think it is a little bit like that. And I've been on the same journey as you have as well. You want to share the knowledge and you want to be out there. And I don't think you should feel awkward about placing those citations on your CV, because it is a work of, sharing it, of that knowledge. I don't think you should feel bad about, taking that off. You should leave it there because you've contributed. That's part of the conversation too.
Oh, yes, again, perhaps that is where you recognize perhaps the system in which you are operating. Yes. Mm-hmm. So I guess sometimes even when you are shortlisting, if you see some kind of journals on your CV, like, oh no, this is not what we're looking for. So sometimes it's about the quality. So if you are just putting 10 journals, make sure it's the top 10. Like, don't bring anyone that would disrupt that rhythm. Yes, but that is I think it goes around about the game we try to play in this industry. Like, you want to make sure you put the best foot forward, even though you might be doing something else that you're passionate about. But if that is not really adding to your publication.
Thank you very much. I will ask the Samuel for time in 30 seconds. Also, I see the mic Smithy, the editor of other journals. So Samuel, I will give you a minute and then I will come back to Mike Smithy.
Thank you, Dr. Bista, and all the panelists for sharing with us. I just wanted to ask the question that what can editors share with us about their thought process when accepting or rejecting an article? What makes for a good article that will be accepted in your journal? Thank you.
Okay. Any one of you quick response or?
I'll give a quick response. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm cutting across you, Kim, but I'll be quick. I think a lot of articles nowadays focus on methodologies, and a rigorous paper will often have a very sound methodology. So I think pay a little attention to that when you are submitting to one of the larger journals.
And I think the first thing that's going to get you a desk reject from our journal is that you didn't look at our aims and scope, because we put out what we want to have. We have a limited scope of articles that we want to do because we have to limit that. Otherwise, we'd be publishing everything. So that's a quick way to get a journal article rejected without even seeing anything.
I was going to say along those lines, imagine a journal is like an animal. If you don't know what it eats, before you know what it is, don't feed. Some eat grass, some eat meat, some eat fruit, right? If you use some kind of analogy like that, just look at the last few issues, look at the conversation that's going on in the journal, look at the what kinds of methodological and even theoretical framework the authors are bringing, what they seem to value, right? And then you'll be able to tell the 1 hour that you invest in understanding the animal is going to save a lot of time and rejection when you actually bring it food.
Thank you. Good analogy, Dr. Sharma. Mike?
Yes, thank you very much. This has been very wonderful to have many editors, et cetera, here to look at what we're doing and how we're doing it. One of the things that came to me a few seconds ago was the idea of large or small journals and the effect that they have and wish to have impact, if you want to say that. And I think about the whole idea of search engines, search strings, search words, and in some way, depending on how you're indexed, you get as much possibility to have your article out there when you're Googled or whatever, as if you're in a large or in a small journal. So it seems to me that, well, if you remember the Reader's Guide to Periodical Literature, way back when I started school, you had to get a big volume once a month, published, big red thing in the library in the reference section, and go through it, to look. And now you can search those. So to some degree, publishing has become much more equitable, if you want to say that.
Thank you very much. Today's session was more becoming editor and co-editors. So in the room, we have 15 editors and a couple of college presidents, dean, provost, and few doctoral students. So this is a highly selected group of scholars. Still, we have 60. One final question: how rewarding your current experience as an editor or co-editor of the journal or the books? Just I'd like to hear your personal experience. Anyone wants to chime in your current experience? What do you suggest, recommend somebody to become an editor?
A quick shout out to journal network ojed.org because of the amazing work by Dr. Bista, Christopher Glass, with Tom Gowdy, other colleagues to find all the resources and help a number of editors who don't need to work on the resource side. We can work on helping the colleagues from around the world to publish. We can work on mentoring and grooming new editors, and so that they can take over when we get exhausted. We can even be idealistic about including people from underrepresented communities around the world. All our idealism would not be complete without your entrepreneurship without your bringing together resources from universities. All the university presidents here, please support one journal. That will add to the ecology. We're not against the commercial publications. We're simply saying they should not cannibalize everything. With the market should be a market of ideas, values, and resources, right? We need alternatives because there are people who cannot possibly pay to publish. This is not about me. This is about all of these amazing colleagues around the world who need to produce, whose ideas and voices and societies and histories and art and culture and need to come out. The world to be born out of knowledge that has become more diverse, more robust, more inclusive. That world cannot be born with one model, especially the one with a paywall. We need more. And all the presidents, I urge you to support one journal, one platform, so that your scholars can do good in the world. I don't mean good is just ideal, good is pragmatic too. Thank you.
Okay, Jeff, I saw your microphone on, and Boniface, I saw your hand raised, but I'll give you just 30 seconds.
Thank you. I can't say more than what Dr. Sharma was just said. We can't do publications. We can't promote justice without everybody else on board. Administrators, public researchers, and everybody who works in academia. We have the people who teach who don't want to publish, and we have people who do research without publishing. So all of those people need to get together and work to have the information out there, research done, so that we can share the knowledge and information to change our current world. So that's, I think, what I would have to add.
Okay, anyone else? All right, I know we are on the top of the hours. The art of writing for publication in any discipline is a painful journey, and each of us has gone through that journey. It requires a solid understanding of research methods and systematic organization of information. You take months or even years to write and rewrite a manuscript and go through the cycle of submission, rejection multiple times, right? Before you actually get accepted. As we said earlier, we have two-way issues. Some author wanted to publish within a week. Some authors target high impact journals, and some authors don't care. They are ready to pay and publish. Some journals are there with a social mission, creating a ripple effect among intellectuals and institutions of learning. And some journals are there to run a business and have been butchering authors directly and the society indirectly. Some institutions and some thought leaders, and I'm glad we have some presidents here and the dean and provost, know how to set the parameters and expectations about where their scholar and faculty should publish from, sometimes without not knowing much about so-called publication industry. And this is particularly painful. All editors here, our guest here, each of you who serves on the editorial board of any journals, you are the gatekeepers, you are the intellectuals, and you know how to support the authors. Each of us need a helping hand in writing manuscript, reviewing manuscript, publishing, and the rewarding articles in the books. And you can count each of us in building a community of scholars. And every writer I know has trouble writing. You can do it together once you know the process, the system, the expectations. So let's stay in touch and grow our community of research scholars. And finally, on behalf of Morgan State University School of Education and Urban Studies family, I really thank all of our guests here, invited editors and graduate scholars, and particularly, our president and dean's provost from several schools for your time and excellent contributions. It cannot be done without you. Thank you so much. I hope to see you all at our next event on April 20th at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. You will hear on the theme of critical perspective and student mobility and international faculty in higher education. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much. It's been a very interesting conversation.